On the playground, 12-year-old Liam's heart stopped beating when HOA officials took a medical backpack that could have saved his life. The president of the HOA, Dana Holloway, was aware of his illness but still intended to discipline him for being a liability. Unbeknownst to them, Liam's father was a litigation attorney who was on the verge of making their brutality a national matter. Behold, the explosive nature of this judicial struggle and the surprising retaliation from justice are just around the corner. First, there was a harsh, repetitive, annoyed tap, not the kind you'd expect from a friendly neighbor dropping by with pie and a grin. The knock came in 3 brief bursts that made it clear they weren't there to chat. Opened the front door of his Sunset Hills suburban 2-story home, Trevor Reed wiped his hands on a dish towel, took a deep breath, and was met with 2 figures standing on the porch, their postures like mission-minded officials. Their matching navy polo shirts flaunted HOA name badges that shimmered like sheriff stars in the sun. They had identical arrogant, over-practiced looks and didn't actually wear police uniforms. The front-row woman appeared to be in her 50s. Her nicely coiffed blonde bob was tucked under her collar. Tight lips and razor-sharp eyes betrayed no mercy at all. The top honcho of Sunset Hills HOA, Dana Holloway. Nearly everyone in the area was familiar with her. She interpreted flowerbed breaches as felonies and cited ordinances as if they were scripture. Beside her, a man named Mitch stood with a clipboard and an air of pretend casualness, as if he were bored but would nevertheless take pleasure in seeing someone fined. "Several people have complained about your kid, Mr. Reed," Dana started, her voice honeyed but fragile. Inconsolable, Trevor scowled. "My kid?" "Yes," she remarked with an effort to hide her disappointment, running unattended in public spaces, bringing in questionable items, and flagrantly disregarding the community's regulations on bag size. Trevor was silent for a brief interval. Not because his anger had fully subsided. He was still attempting to make sense of her utter nonsense. "Hello, Liam." Liam, his son. The kid who, at the age of 12, needed to rest every time he walked a block? That little boy, who had already undergone 3 open-heart surgery by the age of 9. In response, he lowered his gaze. "Hold on a second, are you referring to his bag?" No flinching from Dana. She stated firmly that it is much bigger than what is permitted in Section 12B of the HOA Covenant. It makes other people, particularly the kids, feel uneasy, blocks their line of sight, and creates a tripping danger. Trevor resounded due to his rucksack. Dana said it again, her voice now much colder, because of an unapproved equipment that makes noises, lights up, and shows cables. 3 written complaints and multiple verbal ones have been received by us. Trevor inhaled deeply. There is no device there. A medicinal pack, that is. A synthetic heart pumps blood to my son. That pack keeps him alive, Dana said with a forced grin that avoided making eye contact. As parents, we totally see where you're coming from. All members of the community are subject to the same rules, though. In the shared areas, your son has the same freedom as any other tenant to utilize standard-sized accessories. Typical dimensions. Trevor resisted the urge and ran his fingers over his face. Is the purpose of the pack even clear to you? A cocked head nodded by Dana. Something about a heart was brought up, I think. Trevor felt his heart rate increase. It is tailor-made. It controls the heart rate, the flow of blood, and the backup power system. This is not a bag. It is like a lifeline. With his gaze fixed on his clipboard, Mitch eventually raised his voice. For your household, there is no medical exemption paperwork that is currently on file. Trevor snapped at me twice. I turned it in 6 months ago. Well, consider this your formal notice, Dana remarked with a gleam in her eye, dismissing the whole thing. From a thin folder, she withdrew a folded sheet of paper and presented it to Trevor. The page appeared clean and recently produced, with HOA letterhead affixed to the top, as if it were a seal of approval. Important notice regarding an auxiliary item on the HOA property that is not compatible. Offense: the persistent use of excessively large or unconventional equipment in common areas. Urgent remedial measures are necessary. Trevor read the words twice, then a third time, each time delving further into it, while he stared at it. You refer to my son by name. For existing. A grin never left Dana's face. For breaking well-established rules, we're filing a citation against him. Suddenly, Trevor's voice dipped. His age is 12. That pack is essential for his survival. Her tone was one of courteous menace as she suggested that you think about staying in a private residence. Ensuring the well-being and security of every resident is the responsibility of the HOA. Trevor observed a disturbing resemblance when he gazed upon her. Unwavering faith from someone who believed they were acting morally due to the rule's insistence on it. Scratch that. Strictly no mercy. Fair legislation. Like they had just distributed a parking ticket, Dana and Mitch turned and retraced their steps along the front path. With the notice in his hand and his knuckles white, Trevor softly shut the door behind them. Unaware of it, the paper slightly crumpled in his hand. From his bedroom upstairs, he could make out the steady beeping of Liam's monitor. Something changed inside Trevor as he glanced down at the letter and then at the front door. A minor disagreement about the HOA wasn't going to derail this. We were at war. What all the hubbub was about was lost on Liam. That was never his intention. The problem hardly crossed his mind that evening as they enjoyed their leftover lasagna and garlic bread at the kitchen table. Trevor delicately broached the subject, bringing up the fact that the HOA had paid a visit, but naive Liam did nothing more than blink in the time between bites. Trevor forced a smile and answered, "No, kiddo. Am I in trouble?" as the boy cocked his head to look over Trevor's shoulder with his unkempt brown hair falling across one eye. They think your backpack's a problem." Liam wore a grimace. "Because of the heart." And then there was a little hush. Not the awkward sort, but the kind that creeps up on a child when he or she knows something major is happening but doesn't know how to handle it. Across the table, his mom, Jenna, gave him a squeeze. As was his custom, he resisted. "So, would it be possible for me to visit the park tomorrow?" he inquired. Trevor paused for thought. The park was officially open to the public and supported by the city. Trevor drew a deep breath when he realized that at Sunset Hills, the landscaping, benches, and even the garbage cans were all under the jurisdiction of the Homeowners Association. "All right, just make sure your bag is close by." With a nod, Liam seemed to alleviate all of his problems. They were hell-bent on making it seem like the bag didn't exist, so he should probably keep it close by. It would change from warnings and statements to something completely else within 48 hours, something Trevor had no idea about and could never have predicted. Something permanent would emerge from it. It was in the afternoon on a Saturday. Blue skies, light wind, and families out enjoying the long weekend. Liam took his worn blue-striped basketball to the park and rested on a bench in between hoops. Run he did not. Nobody was bothered by him. Seated there, he took deep breaths as he listened to the faint beep of his portable monitor, which was housed in the pack that buzzed like an engine on his back. At that moment, Dana Holloway appeared. Subsequently, eyewitnesses noted that she appeared intent, completely level-headed, calm, and collected. Similarly to someone who is doing what they feel is their duty. With a clipboard and a phone, Mitch Rayner trailed closely after. At Liam, Dana gestured. Both the welcome and the explanation were missing. They approached him directly. Confusion washed over Liam as he glanced up from his water bottle. "Dana told you straight up that your equipment is against the rules of the community." Mitch reached down and grabbed Liam's backpack strap without asking, warning, or even considering what he was doing. What followed was brief, lasting little more than 4 seconds. Leaning over Liam's shoulder, Mitch wrenched the strap. Something changed. Someone cut a wire. Someone cut off a tube. With a metallic clatter, the pack landed on the pavement once he let go of it. Liam did not faint or slouch. He just fell. His body gave way. No yell, no alert. A muted, abrupt thud, as if someone were to cut the marionette strings. He landed on his cheek rather than his knees. The heart rate monitor made a prolonged, piercing flatline noise. There was a yell. A different individual dialed the emergency number. When the call came in, Jenna got it first. Upon picking up the phone, she abruptly fell silent before letting it fall to the ground. "Your son crashed at the park" was all that came over the other end when Trevor picked it up. "An ambulance is en route." He was possessed when he drove. Trevor arrived at the emergency hospital too late. Liam was already there, intubated and lifeless, barely hanging on. A nurse made an effort to reassure him by explaining that the artificial system had been restarted after 12 minutes, that Liam had technically coded, and that the potential long-term damage was yet unknown. For the most part, Trevor was oblivious. They had set the bag on the counter, and he was staring at it. Rip it apart. The lid of one of the battery cells was ajar. Like a severed artery, a tube dangled loosely. Liam seems to have struggled to keep it together just before passing out, as evidenced by the blood smeared over the zipper and the faint crimson fingerprints. Trevor then noticed that his own nails had sliced through skin as a result of his excessive fist gripping. A tear or two escaped his eye. "I am not ready just yet." He remained motionless in the emergency room corridor, his hands trembling as he gazed through the glass at his son. His shirt was drenched with perspiration. On top of that, he experienced a weighty, age-old sensation rising in his chest. This was more than carelessness. It wasn't merely a lack of knowledge. At that very moment, Trevor Reed quietly promised to keep a child's life support system in his possession. This isn't going anywhere. Medical professionals performed miraculous cures. They informed him about that. As a group of nurses hurriedly around his son Liam's lifeless corpse, Trevor remained rooted to the edge of his son's bed in the neon glow of the intensive care unit. All directions were served by tubes. Automaton chimed in a jittery cadence. On Liam's chest, where the surgical port had been reattached, patched, restarted, but not restored, a weak pale blue light blinking. Speaking in a quiet voice, as if he didn't want the walls to hear, the cardiologist, a gaunt-looking man with kind eyes and the gait of someone who lived in between surgeries, stepped out into the corridor. He claimed that the backpack had been torn with excessive force. The middle line was severed. Without much delay, the system went down. His chest cavity had started to fill with fluid before the paramedics arrived. Trevor remained silent. "It took us a full minute to get the pump back up after he lost oxygen to the brain. It is possible that the harm can't be undone." Unconsciously, like acknowledging a weather report, Trevor gave a single nod. His knuckles grew white when he sat down on the short hospital seat, leaned forward, and clenched his hands so tightly together. He disregarded the vibrations emanating from his pocket-bound phone. The basic, intolerable truth that his son remained unconscious was more important than any text, email, or call. Even at the age of 12, she remains quiet and susceptible. Exactly 12. There was no regulation that Donna Holloway and Mitch Rayner had violated. They hadn't erred in their interpretation of a form or reference. Liam lay on a hospital bed with injured lungs, his heart scarcely beating under synthetic rhythm, and his entire future hanging by wires and a surgeon's prayer after they removed a child's lifeline as if it were luggage or an aesthetically undesirable object. When Trevor got home, it was nearly midnight. It remained dark inside the house. Jenna remained at the medical facility. A throw blanket was nicely arranged on the couch in the guest room, as if someone thought he may sleep there, and the lights were turned down low for him. Not at all. With keys in one hand and hospital bracelets still clinging to the other, he proceeded carefully up the driveway. He noticed it at that moment. Adding insult to injury, a scathing yellow note was affixed directly on the front door. He moved nearer. Section 4B, aggressive residence, and unapproved medical claims are all violations that you are currently in. He gazed at it for an entire minute, not 5, not 10. With him, the wind rustled the leaves. A vehicle drove by. Across the street, a sprinkler went off. However, Trevor remained still. He merely stood there, staring intently at the page as if it were written in a language he had just learned to speak. They referred to it as aggressive residents making unapproved medical claims. Neither violent neglect nor assault on a kid who is dependent on medical treatment, nor attempted murder. Disregard it. That's a violation of policy. With caution, as if the notice were hot, Trevor carefully peeled it off the door. He continued to stare at it for some additional time. Then, without anger or showmanship, he smashed it with his fist. He smashed it to dust in the same manner as you smash something that was never important. At that point, he uttered a word out loud for the very first time that day. This time, no. He spoke with a low, flat, and final voice. You see, Trevor Reed was more than simply a dad. In contrast to his jockey-like demeanor, he was an attorney specializing in litigation rather than civil law. Liability was his area of expertise. He has faced hospitals, insurance behemoths, and pharmaceutical behemoths in his battles. He had a firm grasp of the system's inner workings and could see through its legalese and bureaucracy to the worst that it concealed. This, however, was no faceless corporation. The stakes were high. A lawyer wasn't even on his radar. The attorney was he. The Sunset Hills HOA as a whole would be relieved if all they had ever done was overwater a grass once he was through. Reason being, Trevor now possessed an even more perilous emotion than wrath. Not only did he have proof and motivation, but the most perilous part was that he had absolutely nothing to lose. Trevor did not lose any time. A criminal complaint was made by Liam the morning following his stabilization, charging him with felony assault with intent to hurt a kid. He then proceeded to sue the Sunset Hills HOA in a civil action, bringing individual allegations of carelessness, reckless endangerment, and civil conspiracy against Dana Holloway and Mitch Rayner. It was an unfortunate mistake, according to Dana's counsel. They denied any wrongdoing and stated they were simply confused. They had no idea Liam's bag included medical supplies. Until the video came to light, though. The incident was recorded by a mother who was at the park. It was as if Dana were saying it directly. If we allow one child to break the rules, others will follow suit. Dana whispered, "Let's teach this one a lesson," just as Mitch yanked Liam's bag from his shoulder. The courtroom fell into eerie silence. In an instant, the court wanted to know all of the HOA's communications. Their discovery altered the course of events. Dana received Liam's medical exemption months ago and rejected it, according to internal emails. No issue, that was just one message. Take note of the child. Also, we must put a stop to this before it sets a precedent. Nothing happened by chance or miscommunication. The warning had been shown to them, but they had proceeded nonetheless. An attempt at murder charge was added to the original one. No flinching from Trevor. He was just at the start. No redaction was applied to the emails. That was the most shocking thing for the prosecution. No one anticipated the HOA to provide anything even slightly implicating without a struggle when the judge mandated complete discovery. Time-stamped, initialed, and preserved, they remained. Digitally printed lines that confirmed what Trevor suspected all along. It had been known to them. They were all aware. Dana Holloway had gotten a legal medical exemption 6 months before. Included in the package was a note from Liam's cardiologist as well as documents, schematics, and emergency protocols. Under no circumstances is it acceptable to interfere with this child's life-sustaining medical equipment. This pack is like his external heart. It keeps him going. Mitch Rayner received it after Dana read it and typed 5 sentences beneath it. Not concerned. Even now, he's not great. So, what are you wanting done? Mitch asked. Feel free to address it once another board member added the scary response a few hours later. There was a complete absence of ambiguity, discussion of policies, referrals to ethical committees, or legal counsels. The only thing said was that dealing with a challenged child had become into an inconvenience. The judge remained silent during the presentation of those emails in court. She was unnecessary to. Her response was brief, "You may add attempted murder to the charges." She then turned to the prosecutor and nodded once. With his hands clutched and his jaw tight, Trevor sat immobile in the gallery. He was frowning. "We didn't win this time. I am not ready just yet." Everything he had suspected upon first glance at Liam's lifeless visage on that hospital bed was confirmed by this. "I didn't make this up. A calculation was made. It had already happened to another kid in another neighborhood where the regulations were more important than the people who lived there, so he had to see this through to the end. He had no desire for vengeance. Sorry didn't sit well with him. He wanted a set standard. Such brutality, concealed as cooperation, would cost him everything. He intended to legislate that. Imagine a nation where homeowners association boards would quiver at the thought of touching anything that rightfully belonged to someone else. It was not what happened to Liam Reed that would ensure his name would remain in regulatory clauses and legal papers, but rather what followed. An early spring date was chosen for the trial. Unexpectedly, word spread at a rapid pace. Outrage on a national scale ensued from what had begun as a minor event. Media outlets reported on it. Disability rights groups began public awareness drives. It just took a week for a petition to reach 1 million signatures. Outside the courthouse, demonstrators were already gathered by the time jury selection started, their placards reading "Justice for Liam" and "A backpack is not a threat." There was a record number of people in the courtroom on trial day 1. Photographers stood around the rear wall. Artists began to turn their sketchbooks pages as the doors swung open. Liam was personally wheeled in by Trevor. A slender, pallid child who was still recuperating, he appeared frail. Underneath his shirt hung his chest. Corridors of tubes that terminate at ports on his ribs. A nurse followed in silence, her eyes wide open. Liam remained silent. Doing so was unnecessary. All it took was the sound of his wheels skidding on the floor. He kept staring forward with that blank expression on a child's face after seeing something they can't quite put their finger on. Do not be afraid. No sound at all. Dana Holloway also seemed less arrogant than she had since it had begun. She avoided looking Trevor in the eye. Those in the gallery didn't get away from her. The pressure of the courtroom, like a judgment just before the verdict, made her sit motionless with her shoulders rigid. With his hands crossed in his lap and his gaze flickering between the jurors, Mitch sat down next to her. No longer did they appear smaller. It was not because they were losing, but rather because their true selves were now exposed to the world. There was complete silence in the courtroom. Hold on a second. The sound of a pen dropping may have been heard as the screen's illumination was gradually reduced. Nodding silently, the judge nodded. Pressing play, the prosecutor began their case. The movie started. Parents chatting as their children play in a sunny park, seen through a blurry lens. As he sips from his drink, Liam sits alone on a bench, his backpack propped up against his back. Dana Holloway stepped into the picture after that. Standing next to her is Mitch Rayner, who is juggling a clipboard and a phone. Liam was unspoken to. Not a single question was posed. Just now they drew near. The jury crouched down. A voice belonged to Dana. Let this child break the rules, and others will follow. Subsequently, a short while afterward, with a tone that was nearly whispered. This one needs to learn its lesson. Afterwards, the noise. Quiet, yet easily discernible. Tears in the fabric. A buckle breaking. A metallic screech from inside. Afterwards, there was exact stillness. Afterwards, Liam's corpse slammed onto the floor. The recording did not contain any screams. Quiet down. Nothing but the piercing squeal of the cardiac monitor's battery dying. A courtroom spectator let out a gasp. Someone else hid their mouth. But nobody said a word. Finally, the video paused. There was a blackout. Meanwhile, Trevor rose to his feet. He made his way to the room's middle. I have no notes. No presentation. Absolutely no props. The truth and him alone. He kept his voice down. Doing so was unnecessary. He started with truths. His kid was born with a deformity. Just 6 weeks old, the first operation. 2 years later comes the second. At 10 minutes after the third and most intrusive procedure, a mechanical pump was installed to help Liam's failing heart. The apparatus was detailed by him. I have the bag. The power source. Those tubes. The oxygen controllers. His boy never once grumbled, therefore nobody else ever saw those items. He went into detail about the day Liam could play again. How the bag allowed him to be himself. An opportunity to be a boy without a diagnosis. After that, he halted. Just for fun. His body trembled under its weight. Once more. He turned to face the jurors. He then stated, all of it, in a voice that was even more subdued than the courtroom's illumination. After each operation. Through each restless night. Every possibility. Each and every one of my prayers. Each and every one of them. They were going to remove my son's medical equipment because it didn't fit their aesthetic. He pointed to the defense table, where Dana sat still, her eyes moist with fear. No one inquired. They were unconcerned. They simply noticed something they didn't approve of and proceeded to remove it from him as if it were garbage. Damn, Dana's heart just dropped. She broke down in tears while standing on the stand. Commended with a word of sadness. Regarding confusion. Without ever intending damage. Yet, the jury remained silent. None of them nodded. Silently, they took in every word. The decision was handed down 3 hours afterwards. Prone to guilt. In every respect. Murder attempt. Careless putting a minor in harm's way. A plot involving civil disobedience. Like the words didn't hit her, Dana gazed ahead. As he sank into his seat, Mitch slumped. No smile from Trevor. Nodding once, he glanced across to his son and fighter Liam, who was still in the wheelchair, bound and gagged. It wasn't because they had triumphed. It was because, after all this time, someone else had spoken the truth. On this occasion, the system paid attention. Dissolution of the Sunset Hills HOA occurred. The board was disbanded after the verdict. All police officers fired. Residents who prioritized safety above all else and new leadership who put an emphasis on people over policies restructured the community. With the help of a state mediator, the community's bylaws were put on hold and revised. Plus, families finally felt like they could breathe easy in Sunset Hills after all these years. Justice in the courtroom, however, was merely the initial wave. The attempted murder charge resulted in a 12-year prison term for Dana Holloway. Mitch Rayner's physical role and incriminating digital communications earned him a score of 15. Both were rejected for parole. The court characterized their behavior as an intentional and perhaps harmful misuse of civilian power. The statute that would subsequently be known as Liam's Statute was passed by federal lawmakers a few weeks later. It was a nationwide regulation that forbade any community association, property board, or HOA from imposing restrictions on authorized medical equipment or apparel in public or shared areas. Disciplinary sanctions were severe. It was possible to press criminal charges. On a national level, training was imposed. What Trevor didn't ask for was that. However, the nation was prepared. Everyone in the United States sent a letter. Everyone from parents and grandparents to educators and healthcare professionals. "My son has a chest pump," read one Florida parent. "Libraries, parks, and pools have all requested that we vacate the premises. I sobbed as I observed your condition. Our spirits were lifted by your words. You fought for more than just your son," another Illinoisan. "You battled for our cause as well." Nightly, Trevor would read them softly, maybe even out loud to Jenna. Nobody saw them posted online. They could have avoided it. They carefully stored them in a shoebox, demonstrating how the power of a single voice might reach far beyond the confines of the courtroom. After 2 months of recuperating and relative silence following his trial, Liam returned home. While eating cereal on his second morning back, he glanced up from his bowl and politely requested, "Can I go to the park today?" Taking a breath, Trevor continued. That very park, where his pulse had ceased. The identical seat. The identical room. The regulations had changed, though. He had it now. "You are free to go wherever you choose," Trevor remarked, smiling and leaning over the table. Everything fell back into place as soon as Liam smiled. Justice isn't always shouted down. The issue of punishment is irrelevant. On occasion, it's hardly audible. A young man using a mobility device. A father who would have none of it. A rucksack that, a year ago today, held not only a beating heart but also a movement. On a sunny public seat, Liam's heart had stopped beating exactly that long ago. Just because someone had the idea that rules were more important than a child's life. The inhabitants of Sunset Hills froze once more as they stood before an equally clear sky. This time, though, I'm not scared. At least this time, they took a stand. The mayor glanced out at the assembled throng after adjusting the microphone and tapping it once. Sitting silently in rows of folding chairs were families with strollers full of children, members of the local press, and an unexpectedly large number of HOA leaders from all across the county. Quietness made everyone afraid to speak. Everybody was aware of what day it was. In his opening remarks, the mayor thanked everyone present. It was a victory, not a tragedy, that we celebrate today. In the afternoon light, a newly painted sign shimmered behind him. Memorial Field, Liam Reed. After a little pause, gentle applause ensued. Holding his son's hand, Trevor stood at Liam's side toward the front. Liam sported a button-up shirt in a navy blue color, with sleeves that reached his elbows. He was somewhat taller than he had been a year prior, his hair had grown back, his color had returned, and the breathing monitor still clicked softly beneath his shirt. After the mayor moved aside and signaled for him, Liam paused for a single breath before moving forward. He arrived at the ribbon that extended across the entrance to the new field. He felt the delicate placement of silver shears on his palm. Not out of terror, but from the exertion of holding something still, his hand quivered. All eyes were on the stage. As the press lowered their cameras and parents clutched their children close, The ribbon came tumbling down in a single clean snip. Just the sound of collective breath, relief, amazement, and recognition, no scream of applause or explosion of happiness. Liam smiled, little and proud, and Trevor felt his throat tighten. His son had tied a ribbon over the spot where he had come dangerously close to death. Now, his name would be carried on the ribbon not because he had gone missing, but because he had lived through an ordeal no child should ever have to endure. Trevor turned to face the audience, seeing familiar expressions on the faces of those who had previously avoided eye contact. While some had expressed themselves verbally, others had remained silent in court. Still, they remained, observing and reflecting. One of the girls had a glucose monitor fastened to her arm, and her mother stood erect by her side. A timid young man who used a communication device blinked and waved. A wheelchair-bound man advanced, his eyes welling up with tears. The subject of the HOA regulations had shifted. It was all about what happened next, since Trevor had a new and lasting knowledge. Even in a courtroom, injustice persists. A fine, a verdict, or a prison term do not conclude it. As soon as individuals reflect, as soon as others think twice before acting cruelly, as soon as communities determine that policies must never again take precedence over people, then the cycle will end. That's the significance of the sign. Not out of sympathy, but as a vow, a line that says, "Never again." The field was named after Liam. Liam sat on a bench nearby as the sun dipped low. Trevor joined him, and they watched children play across the wide grass. Liam sat there by choice, not by breakdown. There are no uniform monitors and no rule signage. The innocent play of children. It had been more than a year since Trevor had felt a familiar sensation in his chest. Not triumph. Fairness is lacking. Best wishes. Because legislators and attorneys weren't the ones who started it. Protests and policies were not the starting points. A young lad with an unstoppable heart, a rucksack, and an adventure began.